I signed up for the night maze because I didn't want to be the kind of person who keeps skipping the town things and then complains that nothing ever happens. Ashford, as harvest nights, is the closest we get to a carnival. Strings of bulbs draped over the square, kettle corn, a cover band that always sounds like it's playing from the bottom of a well. The corn maze is the main draw. During the day, it's family stuff, maps and stamped checkpoints and hay rides. After 10 p.m., they switch the sign to adults, turn the bulbs down to a honey-colored dim, and a guy with a bullhorn announces the hide-and-seek hour. The rules were simple. One hider, one seeker. Exchange phones. Turn on location sharing. No climbing the stalks or cutting straight through. The farmer, a huge man named 𝗕𝗔𝗥𝗬 with mitts like dinner plates, emphasized that part. If you get honestly scared, text a safe word to the seeker, and 2 staffers walk the boundary and whistle you out. The maze isn't square. It sprawls over 10 acres of rolling ground, so you get weird angles and false flats. And if you've never been in a corn maze at night, you don't realize how loud it is. The plants hiss. They tick against each other. They make a sound like whispering only when the wind dies and your ears start manufacturing the rest. I was the hider. My friend Theo volunteered to seek. He's the kind of guy who volunteers for things and then ends up actually being good at them. He gave me that grin like he was already counting my failures. 4 minutes, he said. I won't even need 3. Talk like that, and I'm going to climb a fence just to spite you. No climbing, 𝗬𝗘 said from his folding chair without looking up. We handed over our wallets to the staff like the sign said, just to keep people from getting sticky fingers. And we traded phones. Theo set my screen brightness all the way down and showed me his map app. Don't trust the pin, he said. GPS goes to soup under these lights. A guy with a bullhorn walked us to the maze mouth. It looked like a dark room leaning over a brighter one. On the far side of the entrance was a crude wooden tower, the only elevated structure, a place for the staff to watch for rule breakers. A teenage girl with a knit hat leaned against the railing up there and sipped something from a paper cup. You could tell, even from below, she was bored, past help. Seekers count to 100, the bullhorn guy said. Hiders hide well. If we catch you pushing between the rows, you're done. Have fun. Theo turned to the post, leaned his forehead against the rough wood like a kid, and started counting out loud. 1, 2. I slipped into the maze and swallowed the town in one breath. You never realize how much light the square throws until you turn your back to it. The music died behind me like a door closing. The rows sucked me down their long, straight throats. Weathered cardboard arrows at knee height pointed toward something called the Hogback and the river cut. The ground was rutted and hard. I passed a straw bale with a painted pumpkin sitting on it, and then another that had been knocked to the ground. 31, I heard faintly back at the entrance, Theo's voice falling into the maze like pennies into a tall well. I had a plan. Go fast early while he's counting, get deep, then double back on a loop to somewhere that opens into options. Every maze has a few dead spots where the farmer stops caring about cleverness and just shoves rows together. I wanted one of those. Featureless, easy to remember, easy to get back to if I needed to move. I jogged down a corridor and took a right where a rope of fall pennants hung at head height, plastic triangles rasping my jacket as I brushed them. After that, I left toward a carved sign with a raccoon on it, and the words Moonglade burned into the wood. Moonglade, I said out loud, because saying words in the dark pins you to something. My breath made silk in the air. It was colder in the maze than in the square. The ground here dipped and rose subtly. The stalks rattled in little breaths. Past the Moonglade sign, I hit a junction that made no sense. 2 paths leading forward, 1 diagonal, 1 doubling back. But I took the diagonal because I didn't want to end up near the tower where Theo could look down and spot me. 58. I checked the time. 10:16. The hide-and-seek hour ran 10 to 11. But they let each pair keep going until someone won or the hour ended. If you were still hiding when the hour ended, it didn't count as a win. You had to be found, or you had to reach the exit and tag the post before the seeker counted out loud, down from 10. It struck me as a weird rule, the way house rules are weird. You don't know why they exist until you meet the person who made them. The diagonal corridor kinked twice, and then delivered me to a clearing, a round room of trampled earth, maybe 20 feet across, where 5 corridors met like fingers at a palm. In the center stood a little wooden stand with a clipboard attached, a laminated sheet with simple text. If you stood here in sunlight, you'd stand in shadows. This is the Hogback. Do not cut through the rows. Someone had scrawled under that in Sharpie. Nobody cuts, everybody bleeds the same. I was the only one there, and at the same time, someone had just been there. The dirt in the clearing still showed the oval of a recent foot and the diagonal drag of a heel. I stared at it longer than it deserved. I wasn't jumpy yet, just registering small things too carefully, like you do when you read trying to keep your brain full of details, so the blank places Don and T show. Back left from the stand was a path where the corn had been braced with twine. The twine had bits of orange ribbon tied to it every few feet. Maintenance, or a fix for some earlier collapse. I slipped down that one because it looked like something staff used, and then realized that was probably exactly why I shouldn't. I stopped. The air was wet with that brown-green plant smell, half sweet, half old bread. I turned my phone on for a quick glance. No bars, just like they'd worn. The dot that was supposed to be me drifted somewhere between 2 lines that didn't match the path I stood on. Theo's dot was still at the entrance. His final numbers floated into the night like someone counting at the bottom of a stairwell in a house you didn't own. 98, 99, 100. The maze swallowed the last syllable and gave me the whisper of corn for company. I kept walking. The twine path bent twice and then lined up in a long straightaway. At the far end, a scarecrow stood 20 yards outside the wall, visible where the rows opened to a wider field. He had a black felt hat and one arm that drooped like a broken wing. I realized he was an outside landmark and felt a small glow of comfort until I remembered the rules and the promise not to cut. I could see the open field like a dark ocean on the other side of the stalks. Between me and the scarecrow was a green-brown river I wasn't allowed to cross. I turned right into a narrower corridor that narrowed again. The stalks touched my sleeves. It dead-ended at a board with a smiley face burned into it. Under the face was a short paragraph. This is a dead end. If you're here, turn around. If you're still here when you read this again, you took the same path twice. I grinned despite myself. Cute. I turned around. My foot landed on a soft spot in the dirt that had been perfectly firm a moment ago, and my ankle sank. Not enough to twist it, just enough to feel the earth as a thing that moved. When I pulled my shoe back out, the hole held its shape like a footprint waiting for water. Back at the twine corridor, I heard something. Far away, measured, boots on dirt. Theo has a distinctive gait, a little toe-heavy from years of soccer. He always lands the first 2 steps harder, like he's testing the ground. The maze carried the sound away, and then returned it, and I couldn't tell if he was to my right or left. I shot a text because I'm not above a little misdirection. "Enjoy the counting," I wrote. The typing dots appeared, disappeared, returned, then, "Hiding well. The map is junk in here. No anxiety in it. No tell." I slipped the phone into my pocket and moved. The maze didn't feel like a puzzle anymore. It felt like a place that wanted you to call it a puzzle, so you keep treating it like one even after it stopped being fair. I reached another clearing, long and thin this time. A stretched room with hay bales stacked like teeth along the inside edge. A wooden placard read, "River Cut." To my left, the path descended just a few feet, but enough to change the temperature. Cold flowed downhill like water. To my right, a run of cobs had been stripped down to their cores and hung by twine from a crossbar, a kind of curtain. I pushed them aside and entered a short passage that tightened until I had to turn my shoulders. My jacket brushed paper dry leaves. The sound was all around me, near to the ear like breath. The passage turned and fed me out into an almost identical strip as the one I might just left. Hay bales, placard, river cut. I stopped, checked behind me. The curtain of cobs hung exactly as it had before, like a sketch superimposed on a photograph. I was shaky, tired suddenly. "Okay," I said softly, and the word fell out of my mouth like a pebble and didn't hit anything. I texted Theo again. "At the river cut. You'll like it." He wrote, "Funny, me too." I waited for the punchline. None came. I typed, "Haha. Which entrance?" Dots. Then, the one with the hay bales. They all had hay bales. I didn't type that. I listened because you can hear when a friend is near. We know the rhythms of their bodies better than we know our own. There was nothing except the stalks, and somewhere a laugh that might have been someone at the square, might have been a bird, might have been a kid popping out from behind a bale in a different corridor an acre away. A staff whistle blew, 2 short drills. I pictured the bored girl in the tower bringing her fingers to her mouth at the request of an older guy in a safety vest. I pictured them trudging to collect a drunk who decided he was a crow and could live in the corn. Another whistle answered from the far side of the maze, so distant it could have been in another town. My phone buzzed. A photo from Theo, the river cut sign, my sign, the same knot in the wood, the same burned-in R, with a tail like a fishhook. "Stop it," I wrote. "Where are you, actually?" His reply didn't land for 20 seconds, and I watched the corn like you watch water around your calf in a lake you can see into deeply enough to know where things live. Then, counting again. "You moved. Not fair." I stared at the words until my eyes pulsed. "You counted already," I typed. "That's the game. You don't get to reset the rules because you lost track." 3 dots. Gone. 3 dots again. Then, it's the game. If you don't move right, you get counted. Something touched the back of my neck. Just a strand of dry leaf, but the reflex to swat it almost lifted me off the ground. I moved without thinking. Left, right, left, chasing an idea of depth, like a dream that doesn't hold still long enough to become a story. Another clearing, smaller. No sign this time, just the impression one had hung and been ripped off. Nails with the torn cardboard fibers dotted the board. Scuff marks. I bent and touched the ground and brought back a fingertip of black, damp earth. There was a shape pressed into it, an oval, then a bar, a partial shoe print that wasn't mine. The tread was cross-hatched at a different angle. Tiny, stupid detail. Theo wears his soles down at the heel inside edge. This one was worn at the toe. I took out my phone. The map was a ghost, lines and dots wandering, but it gave me one thing I could use. Our clocks. Mine read 10:29. I texted, "You have 30 minutes to find me." He answered in less than a breath, 43. We were not looking at the same clock. I told myself it was just delay. His phone stuck with the square S Wi-Fi and mine on whatever stray bar reached across the field. I told myself that because it was the story that kept my legs working. I picked a path that went slightly uphill because I wanted the wind, and the wind was a little stronger on the small rises. At the top, I could see the tower across the maze, just the top third of it, and the girl took off her hat and shook out her hair and put the hat back on. In that quick, bareheaded second, I felt better, like I'd been seen even though I hadn't been. I moved toward the tower. Not straight, never straight, that's how you end up at the fence with 𝗬𝗘𝗦 yelling. But with that dog leg thinking where every right leads to a left, and the sum of them is mostly forward, the tower ducked behind the corn and popped up again, and then disappeared entirely. And when I reached a clearing and saw it finally head on, my stomach dropped. I was closer, too close. I had not been moving toward it long enough to be this close. Theo texted, "I can hear you." I stayed still. My breath made a small ghost. The corn said its terrible old secrets to itself. Another text, "Keep hiding. I'll count again." That made me angry, the way a bad rule makes you angry. Like you're losing to something visible only to the person who invented it. I texted back without thinking, "Count all you want. I'm done playing your version." A minute passed. 2. Theo sent something that wasn't words at first. Just a photo, blurry, the kind you get when you shoot too fast. The same Moonglade sign I'd passed, burn marks in the wood like little constellations. Then he sent, "If you think you're not playing, you're really playing." I put the phone in my back pocket and walked. I made myself move slowly, because sprinting gets you sloppy. The paths shifted underfoot. No, not shifted, I did. The ground felt like something with breath. I hit a T-junction and turned right for no particular reason, and 5 steps later realized I had turned into Theo's stride. My feet landed the way his do when he's in a hurry. Heel too soft, toe too hard. I corrected, but I couldn't unfeel it. Another clearing. Another sign. The stand. Under it, in different handwriting than the rest, someone had written in ballpoint, "Don't be the counter." I tilted my head at it and then laughed, because it was too perfect, too on the nose. I moved to the left and found a path with lanterns strung above it. Old-fashioned glass panes and little metal roofs. Like pagodas, they flickered with electric tea lights, not real candles. But the light they made was candlelight anyway. Orange and soft, the kind you can forgive yourself by. The lanterns guided me into a long, narrow place between rows where the corn broke into an absence and then resumed. The air here tasted like dust off a book. My phone buzzed. Theo, 29. Me, you are not counting. This is not the rule. Theo, keep saying that and we'll meet in the middle. A staff whistle blew again. One trill, then a long one. An answer came back, nearer, and I let that be a hand on my shoulder, pushing me forward faster. The lanterns winked out one by one behind me, like someone was pinching them. I reached for the next corner and saw a shape there, a man-sized dark with shoulders. I froze. The shoulders didn't rise or fall. I tapped my phone light once, a tiny wedge of brightness, and the shape broke into pieces. A stack of hay bales covered by a tarp that had been caught by the wind and hung in a curve that suggested a person. I laughed out loud at how my heart hurt, and then heard a shoe scuff behind me. Not mine. "Theo," I said, turning. No one stood there. Corn stood everywhere. The first voice came then, not loud, but very close, and if I had been holding anything, I would have dropped it. "Ready or not," it said. Not quite a whisper, not quite speech, more like the maze using a throat it found. I ran, not smart, but honest. I ran past the tarp and into a part of the maze where the ground remembered rain from days ago and gave it back in scent. I ran until my chest pulsed and my eyes felt overwide, and when I stopped, I wasn't anywhere different than I had been. I was back at the river cut. The sign was cracked. It had not been cracked before. The crack ran through the V like a lightning bolt. My skin did that prickly thing that makes you remember every time you didn't listen to an older person. I touched the wood because I had to test the world, and it was real and splintery. On the back, in marker, someone had written, "There is one way to end a game you didn't start." I took a photo, sent it to Theo. My hands shook enough that the picture went a little smeary, like the sign was moving or I was. His reply, "Don't send me what I can see. 21. Me. Where are you? Theo. I can see the tower. Can you?" I could. It rose ahead of me again, closer than it should be. The girl leaned her elbows on the rail and looked into the maze with that bored, far-away face. She raised a hand at someone on the ground I couldn't see. She didn't raise it at me. Me. I can. Theo. Good. Keep going. I went. The maze did something I did. No, it could do. Then, it opened into the field and did. The rows thinned to a fringe, and beyond them was the scarecrow again. Closer now. He stood with the broken wing arm and his hat cocked and his face a burlap sack with 2 black buttons. I could have reached out and parted the fringe and stepped into the field to cut 2 minutes off my life. I didn't. I'm not a fence cutter. I don't break the spine of a book to make it easier to read. I stuck to the corridor until it arced back inward. 15, the voice said, and I couldn't tell if it came from behind me or ahead. I saw a flash of safety vest through the corn. I saw a flashlight beam sketch a shape on the stalks. Relief rose in me so fast I had to swallow it. "Hey," I yelled, and the corn made my voice small. "Hey." The beam swung my way. A man pushed through an official opening, one of the cut-throughs staff were allowed to use, and lifted his hand. "You good?" he said. His voice was gravelly and young at once, sleep and sugar. "Yeah," I lied. "Just, how do you get out of here if you don't want to be found?" He smiled in a way that wasn't unkind, but made me feel like a kid at a threshold. He pointed. "Follow the lantern run to the stand, right at the Hogback, left at the Moonglade, or just keep walking. Most folks end up back at the tower eventually." "Thanks," I said. "Hey, what's the safe word again, in case my friend needs it?" "Harvest," he said immediately. "Wave your phone, someone will see you." "Right," I said. "Harvest." He nodded, but it looked like a nod he'd given 100 times that night. I started to move past him, then turned back. "If someone wanted to stop the game altogether," I said, like before someone got found. Is there a way? He rubbed his chin through his vest collar where it had ridden up. For the first time, his face had to think. Stop it, he said. The hour ends at 11. He looked at his watch. It's 10:14. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. He noticed and did the kind of chuckle you do when someone mishears a time at a party. You okay? I said I was, because once you start saying you aren't, you have to make a case. And my case would sound like a joke told out of order. I walked. I took his instructions because I wanted them to fail, so I'd know where I was. Lantern run to the stand, right at the Hogback, left at the Moonglade. They worked in the sense that I reached each in turn, but when I passed the Moonglade sign, the letters on the wood were different. The O had a chip out of its left side now. The moon burned into the wood at a tiny notch for a crater I hadn't seen before. 9, said the voice, and it was Theo's maybe, or mine maybe, or the Maze's. I texted him, Harvest. He wrote back instantly, not your word. I stopped. The corn made a sound like it was leaning in to listen. I typed, who's then? Theo, counters. Me, you're not the counter. Theo, someone is. I could have thrown the phone. I could have walked straight until the fence cut me and climbed anyway, and let 𝗕𝗔𝗏 throw me out. I could have sat down on a hay bale and sang until someone decided I was the worst kind of drunk and escorted me back to the square. Instead, I did something small. I turned my phone flashlight on and I shined it down at my shoes, and I followed the scuffs and the spots where the dirt told a story. I looked for prints that weren't mine. I found them, finally, near a place where the corridor bent around a patch of stalks that had been knocked and then tied up right again. The print was deeper at the toe, the way the partial had been. It went left. I went left. The corridor fed into a skinny space where a string of bulbs hung without lantern glass. They burned that same honey color, and they threw shadows that moved in slow lunges as the bulbs trembled in the wind. I turned a corner and saw him. Theo stood in the slot of a junction, back turned, looking down another corridor. He was still, so still, that the corn forgot to touch him. Theo, I said, and my voice came out wrong in my throat. He didn't turn. He lifted his hand and rubbed his knuckles along the seam of his jaw, the way he does when he's thinking hard. 8, he said softly. Don't, I said. Don't you dare. He tilted his head like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. You moved wrong, he said, and it was his voice but thinner, like too much wind had gone through it. So I have to count again. It's not even me. It's how you get back. I took a step closer. His shoulders didn't flinch. The corn touched me, and not him. Look at me, I said. Look at me and say my name. He did look then. He turned to slow, and his face was both my friend's and not. The way faces look when you see them in a window at night, and the room lights still the depth. His eyes were darker than they should be. Not shadow, just wrong math. But the mouth was Theo's. The scar at the corner where he slipped on the dock that summer was Theo's. The little dent in his eyebrow was Theo's. 7, he said gently. You're making it worse. I reached for him. My hand slowed in the air like it was moving through corn silk, and he didn't move to meet it. He didn't step back, didn't step forward. He lifted his hand to count on his fingers, 6, and when he folded it, I saw his palm. A word had been written there in black marker, thick lines. Harvest. I laughed. It came out like a cough. Okay, I said. Okay, harvest. I'm done. He lowered his hand. His eyes didn't change. It's not your word, he said again. And this time there was something like apology in it. You don't get to end a game you didn't start. What does that even mean? I said. Who started it? 5, he said, but not to me. I stepped past him then because I couldn't stand there and be counted like a child. I chose a corridor at random just to defy the math, and found myself back under the naked bulbs in 2 turns. I chose another and reached the Hogback sign with the same crack in the same place I had never noticed before, and which had probably always been there. I tried to text the staff number on the pamphlet the gate guy had handed out, and my phone suggested contacts from 6 months ago, like it didn't not know where the tower was. I stopped running. I walked. I walked the way you walk when you want an animal to know you. We're not a demon, just a person who forgot their place. The maze liked that. It unfolded a straightaway for me, and then a small room with a bail bench, and tucked behind it, a plank with pencil marks on it, like a kid had come here one day and made a secret. The marks were numbers. They tallied to 11 sets of 10, crossed out. Next to the last set, someone had written more carefully. Got home. I stood there a long time. The corn leaned and reclined in its slow, breathing way. The tower rose ahead of me when I came out, nearer now. Near enough I could see the girl's braid under her hat. She was talking to someone taller beside her, a man with a thermos. The man laughed and put his hand on the rail, and the tower creaked in a familiar pattern. 3 beats, then 2. The tower creaks that way because of a warped rung on the west side. I learned that 3 years ago, when I walked up during the day and looked out over the field and realized how small the maze really was. 3, said the voice, and it came from everywhere and nowhere. Stop, I said. Not to the maze, not to Theo, to myself. Stop being the kind of person who thinks the rules happen to someone else. Stop believing there's always a later. I slid my phone open and turned location sharing back off because the little blue lines were telling me a story that ended in a dot instead of a door. I put the phone in my pocket and raised my hands like the staff asked you to do when you were coming out so they didn't mistake you for someone trying to cut. I walked toward the tower. The path didn't make sense for the first 20 steps, and then it did. 2 lefts, a right, and suddenly I was in a corridor lined with little white stones that only the staff used. The stones led to an opening. The opening gave onto a short, straight walk. The tower loomed like a ship's prow. The girl spotted me and lifted her hand the way people lift hands when they have seen 200 people in an hour, and none of them have been nearly as interesting as their phone. The man with the thermos turned. 2, the voice said, but softer now, like it had a mouthful of something. I stepped into the last corridor. It ran straight to the post with the counting numbers carved into it, the one Theo had leaned on. If the seeker was within sight when the hider reached the post, the hider had to tag it, and then the seeker got to shout the last 10 down. It's a silly rule because it prolongs wins by a handful of seconds. It is the kind of rule that makes the game feel like a tradition, and therefore something good, even when it isn't deep. I broke into a jog. The last 15 feet felt like 30. The post was a tall, dark bone in the ground. The girl looked at me without interest. The man with the thermos said, "Evening," like you say it in places where that word is a handshake and not a time of day. I reached out. "1," said the voice. My palm hit the wood. Silence. The kind that happens in churches and hospitals. The corn paused its whisper. The bulbs didn't buzz. Somewhere, one of the cover band guys hit a wrong note, and even that sound didn't arrive here. The girl in the tower cocked her head like a bird. The man with the thermo said, "You're good," "Seekers that way," and pointed down the outside boundary where a rope kept you from wandering in after you got out. I exhaled. It shuddered out of me and made me feel like I was losing heat. "Thanks," I said. "My seeker's Theo. Tall, bad hairline, laughs like his throat hurts." The man nodded like he could see that man and 10 other men. "They circle," he said. "If they don't find you quick, they circle without knowing they do. He'll be out." I waited at the rope for 2 minutes, then 5, then long enough that the girl in the tower pulled out her phone and leaned on the rail long enough that the band started the song I remembered from high school and finished it long enough that the man with the thermos said, "You can go back in, if you want. Find your friend." I shook my head. I wanted to stand in the light for a while. I wanted to watch the entrance and see Theo come out complaining, hand already up to push his hair back, telling me I cheated by being the only person he knew who could hold still for that long. I wanted to go to the truck with the cinnamon donuts and buy 2 and pretend we won something. At 10:53 by the square clock, Theo texted me. The text came through 5 times, the same line in a row, like someone bumping the enter key with a palm. "It's your turn to count." I looked up at the tower. The girl wasn't there. The man with the thermos had gone to talk to Kudai at the far corner. People filed past me laughing. Couples with their cheeks leaf-burned by the cold. Kids who were not supposed to be in there grinning like they got away with something. No one came out holding their phone up like a flag the way Theo would. I typed back, "I'm outside." His reply, "No, you're not." I swallowed and felt the swallow like a rock. I typed, "Step out. I'll see you." He sent a photo of the post. The wood was dark and carved numbers stood out white where the grain had split. My handprint, if there had been one, didn't show. In the background, the tower was just visible, and the girl's hat was not. I had never been more comforted by a shitty picture. I showed it to the man with the thermos when he came back. He squinted at the screen, then at the post, then at the screen again. "This is the post," he said, like we were confirming a body. "He says it's my turn to count," I said, "Too bright." "We're done." I tagged it. He nodded slowly. "Some folks keep playing," he said. "That's okay. He'll come out when he's finished." "It ends at 11, I said. He looked at the square clock. "It does." It did. The band stopped, the bulbs brightened, and the family crowd moved back in like a tide. Staff did the last sweep. 2 men with vests and radios. They found a dropped glove and a plastic crown from a headband and a flask that someone pretended not to recognize. They didn't find Theo because he stepped out at 11:17 with 3 other guys and a girl, laughing, cheeks raw. He looked right at me and didn't see me for a second, and then he did and shouted my name. "Where the hell did you go?" he said, and I almost hugged him, and then didn't, because I didn't know who I would be hugging. "You hid in the corn, didn't you? You cut." "I tagged the post," I said. "You saw me. You sent me a picture." He frowned. "You never tagged." I counted, and you never showed. Then these guys popped out near Moonglade, and we looped back together. "You kept counting," I said. He scratched his eyebrow. "That's the rule," he said, like something that had been rehearsed before he was born. We left with donuts, and the hot, sweet breath of them kept the world ordinary long enough to get to the car. On the way, Theo stopped and turned slowly and looked back at the field. It lay there like a creature that had gone to sleep. "We should do it again next weekend," he said. "I almost had you." I told him sure, I told him we could switch and I'd count. He made a face like that would be unfair. He said, "Nah, you're better at hiding than I am." I said nothing because sometimes words make doors where there should be walls. That night in bed, when the house settled and the fridge clicked and the radiator knocked, my phone buzzed. A calendar notification I hadn't set. Harvest nights, hide and seek, 10 p.m. Below it, a message from an unknown number with no preview. I opened it and it was blank. And then, after a second, letters appeared, as if the sender were writing them while I watched. Ready or not, they wrote. Then, after a heartbeat long enough to count in, another line. If you want to end a game you didn't start, don't hide. I put the phone face down and listened to my own breath until it sounded like the maze. Next weekend, we didn't go. We told each other we'd go the weekend after and then didn't do that either. The calendar alert showed up each Friday night without fail, long after the fair packed up, long after the corn turned brown at the edges. I stopped dismissing it and let it sit on my screen like a small light I refused to touch. Sometimes I'd be out past town where the road rises and you can see the field from the crown of it, and the tower would be a pencil stuck in the night. The wind would move the dry stalks and make that whisper, and I would tell myself the sound was only plants knocking their old hands together. I didn't count. I didn't hide. I learned the shapes of rooms in my own house, the way you learn your way around a maze, the hard way, in the dark. On the last warm night of fall, I woke at 2:17 to a small sound from the kitchen. Not a creak, not a step, a breath that wasn't mine. I lay there holding still the way you hold still even when there's no point. My phone lit on the nightstand. A photo arrived. The river cut sign, hairline cracked through the V like a tiny bolt. Under it, my own text from weeks ago, faint in the corner where the OS had recorded it. At the river cut, you'll like it. Then a second message from Theo's number, except I knew it and didn't. The way you know your own reflection if the glass has been heated and cooled too fast and holds a ripple. Count, it said. And because there are rules, and because someone started them, and because that is how you get back, I opened my mouth to say one.